Good evening. Well, welcome to our LACCS alumni. Could I please ask our alumni to stand and be recognized? And just a little shout out to our friends who are joining us again. Welcome back. And welcome to our guests. Could our guests just do a wave? We won't put you on the spot too much. We're thrilled to see all of you. I've been doing this work for about 3 years here at Alverno, and my 9 or so years teaching prior. And I'm always not really surprised, but I'm always delighted to think about the fact that teachers are probably the only profession that would give up a Thursday evening and come to continue their own education. I see this time and again, and so I just thank you all for being here. That means a lot to us, and it means a lot to the kiddos that you work with. And so if you could just take a moment to turn to the person to your left or your right and thank him or her for being here. Some of you met a few of our LACCS directors already tonight, and those of you who are in our community and our alums know them, but I want to give a little shout out to the other LACCS directors. My name is Amy Karsten. Nancy Athanaseo did a great job leading you in circle this morning. Can you give a wave, Nancy? And where's Julie? If Julie's not in the room, it's because she's doing 1 million things behind the scenes. So can we just do a really loud clap for Julie? She'll watch that on the video later. And then I also want to thank our benefactor, the reason that we all are able to be here and continue our education, Mr. Dick Pieper, who is with the Wisconsin Character Education Partnership. So can we just give Mr. Pieper a round of applause as well? Thank you again for sponsoring this evening. Tonight we are in our 7th LACCS session for the year. It's hard to believe. We started the school year exploring the 11 principles of character education, and each school team has started to use this framework to examine existing initiatives and areas for improvement. Through our sessions, dedicated work time, and school visits by our LACCS directors, each team has received coaching to develop their own character education plan. By now, I'm hoping, the LACCS participants here can tell you that character education is not a curriculum, it is a shift in school culture. We have been exploring best practices in social and emotional character education. These include leadership, service learning, restorative practices, mindfulness, meaningful reflection, trauma, and of course tonight, equity and inclusion and youth voice. All the while, the teams that are here tonight have been creating a personalized character education plan, which is unique to their school. We have schools here with LACCS at every stage of their journey in character education. We have state and national schools of character. Can I get a little stand up or a wave from our state and national schools of character? A little higher, be proud. And we have individuals in this room who are just starting out in the very first steps of their journey. It's very exciting. Above all, every person in this room is dedicated to teaching the whole child. And for that, we are grateful. During breaks or at close, I encourage our guests to connect with the LACCS team here and ask questions, and also certainly connect with the directors. You have a wealth of experience surrounding you and a ton of passion in this room, and that is the beauty of the work that we do. Our LACCS learning community for 2019-2020 is now forming. We would love to talk to you about joining our new cohort, and I'm excited to say that we have a lot of schools already talking about joining and sending a team. So very thrilled to do that, and the new application will be online probably in the next couple days. So that's my sales pitch. Now let's get to the reason you're here. We have 3 guests that I want to really call some special attention to tonight that are going to be guiding you through our evening. The first is Cheryl Kniesel. And Cheryl I met a few weeks ago at Ed Camp Elmbrook. She is an art teacher for the Wauwatosa School District, correct? And she also has parlayed her amazing sketchnoting talent into a business. I was intrigued when I saw how her graphic or visual note-taking perfectly captured a session that we both attended. I immediately realized how useful and meaningful this style of note-taking would be for my own career as a student had it been accessible to me. For I was a visual and not always an auditory learner. So I think it is fitting tonight that she is here since our theme is inclusion. On the tables, there are some markers and paper for those of you who may not have a journal with you, in case you're inspired by Cheryl to do some visual note-taking on your own. We are recording the sketch and I'll be adding it to the online binder for LACCS participants. Thank you for being here, Cheryl. Our next guest is Tammy Holton Arnold. She is a certified Nurtured Heart Approach trainer. She may be a familiar face to some of you who were here in September. She did an awesome activity that encouraged each of us very early on to dig a little deeper to see the character greatness in one another. How many of you remember that day? We were back in the corner. You remember that? It was pretty powerful. I know. I'm getting a little teary thinking about it. She's back tonight to do some activities with Roberto, and she's brought along some great resources. They're on the sharing table and in the online binder for our remote participants. Check them out. And now, I would like to introduce Roberto Rivera. I saw Roberto last June at the DPI conference in Madison. Any Roberto fans that have seen him before? Woo woo! And for everyone else, you're in for a real treat. Roberto's stories are not only compelling, but his research and connection to the CASTLE framework strongly support the need for youth voice in the work that we do. In November, our LACCS participants had the opportunity to visit Brown Deer Middle High School, and you saw for yourself the value of incorporating youth voice into this important work we do, and how that can really be the thing, the piece that creates the climate shift and culture shift. I know Roberto's connection between youth voice, spark, and relationships will resonate with all of you as much as it did for me. So with that, please give a warm welcome to Roberto Rivera.
How's everybody doing? All right, before I get started here, can we give a big round of applause for all the organizers of this LACCS community, incorporating culture, incorporating character into our public education system. Can we actually give them a standing ovation? Are you guys all right with that? Let's do it. All right, there's one other person I would like us to give a round of applause to. This person would not be here unless they understood this fact. That if we want to see a level of youth thriving that most school communities are not seeing, we're going to have to do things that most school communities are not willing to do. So please give it up for yourselves for understanding that. Being here on a beautiful spring evening, give yourselves a round of applause. So again, my name is Roberto Rivera. My friends call me Berto. You can call me Berto if you'd like. I'm the Chief Empowerment Officer of the 7 Mindsets group based out of Atlanta. I've been living and working in Chicago the last 10 years, but I'm actually born in Madison, Wisconsin. Came back and did my alma mater at UW-Madison, and I must say that I had my beginning in my academic trajectory at a community college not too different from this one. I think some of you were engaged with one of my colleagues who came earlier in the series. Who remembers Scott Schickler? So he's the other CEO, he's the Chief Executive Officer, whereas I am the Chief Empowerment Officer. So y'all be ready. We're about to get empowered over here. So the title of my talk, I've kind of remixed it a little bit. From Surviving to Thriving. Activating SEL and equity to promote youth voice. And at Seven Mindsets, we have a core belief. How many of us know it's important to know what you value and what you believe? We have a core belief. And we believe that all young people should have an opportunity to thrive. All young people, despite their race, their ethnicity, their ability, their sex, or their gender orientation. And we believe that folks that historically have been called at risk, traditionally framed in a deficit light, talked about in teachers' lounge as being part of the problem that needs to be fixed. We believe with the right relationship and systemic disruption, how many of us know systemic disruption? Sometimes it's a very healthy thing. These young folks can in fact demonstrate that they are at opportunity youth, full of assets and not problems to be fixed, but in fact solutions to be released. So to kind of paint a little picture, to have this be exemplified, and now painting a picture means something a little different with my colleague over here doing this live painting. Let's give her another round of applause. This is amazing. I want to share a story about my best friend named Carlos. And Carlos's story fits the story of a lot of young people that get caught in the system, the education system, in other systems in society. When he was in elementary school, Carlos was told he was LD, learning deficient. In middle school, his misdirected entrepreneurship skills got him kicked out. Some of y'all caught that. In middle school, how many of us know middle school is some formative years? How many of us in the online community know that? Indeed. Hey, there's my colleague Barb. How you doing? So, my friend, while he was 14, 15 years old, got kicked out of school, ran away from home, went through drug rehab, and even tried to take his own life. Anybody know a Carlos? Maybe they go by a different name. A Carla, Charlie, Chuck, or the like. A young person just struggling to survive. Anybody know someone like that? Fortunately, this is not the end of Carlos's story. Carlos told me, he said, "Big bro, I realized I was an LD, learning deficient. I was LD, I just learned different." Never heard that one before. So let's practice this. Let's say you are not learning deficient. You just learned different. And he started to not just think that, but feel that in his heart. How many of us know it's a big difference when you start to feel something is real, right? He told me, "Big bro, I started using my learning difference in school, and I started doing well. My friend went to a Big Ten university. He created his own major. I didn't know you could do that. He redirected his entrepreneurship skills, created his own community-based organization, named one of the top 10 change agents in America by Search for Common Ground, and now my friend, who was told he was LD, is getting a PhD in education." Now, I have stories. I'm sure many of you who've been in education for some time, y'all have stories. So we can break some, turkey club wraps so we can share stories at some point this evening. I could tell you about Ernest Green. Goes by the hip-hop name Ern Green. Get it? Ernest Green, Ern Green. First one in his family to graduate from high school. First one to go to college. And he's now a registered nurse. I could tell you about Yadzeni Gonzalez, goes by the nickname Zenny, who I believe might be the next Malala coming out of Chicago. A young lady who doesn't have this 9-digit number that so many in our country say is so necessary. And she graduated from high school, was in her final semester in college for her undergrad, and her brother got murdered in cold blood. Used that pain as fuel to graduate to honor his memory, and is now graduating with an MSW from the University of Chicago in June. And I will be there at that event. So tell Desmond Tutu and all these other guys. No, I'm just kidding. But I will be there. But I wanted to open up with this story because it's very personal to me. As many of you guessed, it's not just the story of any Carlos. It's the story of Roberto Carlos Rivera. This is my story. And so many people will wonder how I went from this kid who was helpless and hopeless to someone today that I'm hopeful and helpful, but you got to confirm that with my wife. Someone who was a former dope dealer to what I call myself today, and I don't think I'm alone up in here, I'm a hope dealer. Do we have any other hope dealers in the house? Make some noise if you're a hope dealer. Slinging that raw, uncut, and it's highly addictive. But there's lots of it, and it's not illegal. And so this has been a journey, a transformative journey. But I had to learn some things along the way. I had to learn 7 different mindsets. How many mindsets? 7. I had to realize I was connected to someone who could see the real me. How many of us know it just takes one positive relationship with an adult? This person helped me to realize that I had something inside of me. I had some value. I had a passion. And I could put that passion first in my school, in my work, and in my life. I started to understand that it's very different when we have an attitude of gratitude mindset. How many of us know that can help us to see some things that may go unnoticed? I realized there was places I could go to take this spark of passion and fan it into a flame. I started to become 100% accountable, to own all of my good and all of my pain. And I started to realize that everything is possible and that pain can go through a rigorous process where it becomes a fuel that I call a propane that could empower me to make a difference, to live, to give, to be a servant in my community. And that I didn't have to wait till next year or next term or the next degree to start this service, this life of thriving, that I could start right now. Because the final mindset is the time is now. The time is what? Now. The time is what? Now. The time is now. So you see me up here. It looks like I'm alone. But if you put on your 3D glasses, you'll find those underneath your seat. And perhaps bells will go off throughout this talk. You'll realize I'm not up here alone. There's a great cloud of witnesses around me. People who've journeyed with me. People just like you who have what I call Michelangelo vision. Now, Michelangelo, as the story goes, was trying to do some training of some pupils. I know some of us, we got kids, so we're thinking right away about Donatello, Raphael, Master Splinter, and Master Shredder, but I'm not talking about the green one who eats pizza. So the Renaissance man was trying to teach some pupils how to do some sculpting. And I don't know if he went through some LACCS training. I can't remember all the details. But he must have been into some project-based learning because he gave these pupils a stone, a big, ugly stone. And he let them have at it. Now, they're in this hall with the sculpture of David and others, masterpieces. And so these folks are like, okay, we're going to think, 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 think. We're going to make our masterpiece. Think, 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 think. So they start chipping away. And minutes turn into hours, turn into days. And finally, they step back to admire the masterpiece, covered in silt, probably sweat. And it looked like something maybe out of a horror movie. Like, I don't know, The Blob maybe, right? So they throw down the tools. They come over to Michelangelo, and this is my rendition. They say, hey, Mike, how do you create something so beautiful out of something so ugly? How do you create something so precious out of something so worthless? And Michelangelo, you have to think, is probably realizing he's got a teachable moment. How many of us know about teachable moments? Yeah. I don't know how excited he got. Maybe he paused for a minute, licked his lips. I don't know. But he probably got excited a little bit. And he said, well, the first lesson I need you to know is I'm not creating anything. I first build a relationship with the stone. Sometimes it takes a few days, sometimes a few weeks, sometimes longer. But eventually the stone will reveal the beautiful sculpture within it. And then my job, he says, is easy. I seek to just chip away at the rough pieces that have trapped the sculpture. Now, this is a nice story. What does this have to do with education? Nothing at all. I just thought it'd be entertaining. But when we look at the root word education, it comes from the Latin term educere. Can you all say that with me? Educere. And what educere means to bring out that which is already there. Right? And so even though we have a lot of pedagogies, a lot of frameworks, in fact, sometimes as educators and education leaders, I think we suffer from a thing I call framework fatigue. And I do have some medicine that helps for that. I'll be selling it for $9.99.99. Also helps with heartburn. It also helps with stomach ache. It does make your eyes bleed, you know, these side effects things. We don't go into detail about those. But in all seriousness, right? So when we started to realize that, wait a minute, relationship is so key. In fact, I think education can be boiled down to two things. One is to see the beauty and brilliance in our youth. And two is to create an experience or series of experiences where young people can see that beauty and brilliance in themselves. But how many of us know sometimes it takes a little effort, it takes a little exercise to get this kind of Michelangelo vision. It's almost like a superhero power. So I'm going to tag one of my Justice League friends here. This is Wonder Woman, aka Miss Tammy. And she's going to lead us through an activity of helping us to cultivate this Michelangelo vision in one another. Tammy?
Does this work? Hello? Okay, so I wanted to just say really quickly that I was here in September when Scott Schickler, one of the co-authors of the 7 Mindsets book, presented all morning. We did an activity after lunch. One of the 7 mindsets is do it now. And I went home and on my phone, I sent Scott an email and I said, I just think your 7 mindsets program is phenomenal. And I think it would even be better with the nurtured heart approach. Would you be interested in a partnership? Here we are. 6 months later, the other author of the book, Jeff Waller, is a Nurtured Heart Approach trainer. We're creating a workshop, how to train the 7 mindsets through the Nurtured Heart Approach. Roberto and I have connected. So those mindsets, I say take them seriously, because that's why I'm back. So we're going to get to do some more Nurtured Heart Approach right now. So the idea of the stone, and the idea of the student. There's greatness in the student. The student isn't broken to be fixed. It's discovering the greatness, bringing out the greatness that is already there. So we're going to do that with we're going to play a couple of fun theater games, and then we're going to talk about that greatness. So what I would like you to do, if you remember, I like to really give explicit direction. So you're going to stand up and find a partner at your table, but you'll be standing, and when you have your partner at your table, please look at me silently for the next direction. Go. Tammy and Stephanie are ready. That table's ready. Back corner is ready. 3's great. You'll figure it out. It's not math. This table's ready. You're ready. Okay, so we're going to play 3 quick games. These are just fun theater games. The first game goes like this. It's called Mime. So Jennifer, would you be my partner? So Jennifer is just going to do, if we're partners, we face each other. Yeah, come a little closer. Sorry, I'm going to stay by the microphone for the benefit of everybody. And so whatever I do, Jennifer does. And we're at 0 volume, but whatever I do, she does. And so then I'll let you do that for a little while, and then I'll say switch. Oh, she's good. She's not stopping. Okay, so let's give Jennifer, I say power clap, and you go. Let's give Jennifer a power clap. That was good. Not every room does it well enough on the first time. That was phenomenal. Good energy. So the person with the shortest hair goes first. You'll go. I'll say switch. We'll stop. You'll be at 0 volume. I'll give you the next game. We're going to play 3 really quick games. And go. Lots of smiles. Many people at 0 volume. And switch. Ooh, we've got pirouetting in the back. Very nice. Love it. And stop. All eyes on me at 0 volume. Give yourselves a round of applause. That was awesome. So the second game is called What You Doin'? And so it goes like this. Jennifer, if you'll be my partner again. So the person with the shorter hair, if you don't mind, I don't mean to discriminate against the people with the shortest hair, but if you wouldn't mind just going first for all 3, it'll just make it go a little quicker. So let's say I have shorter hair. The person with the shorter hair is just going to do this, like you're brushing your teeth. And your partner says, what you doing? So I'm not going to say brushing my teeth. I'm going to say something else. And whatever I say, Jennifer's going to do. Jumping jacks. What you doing?
I'm knitting.
What you doing? So then you... Oh, did we do it backwards? You tell... Yeah, sorry. Ooh, good catch. Yes.
What you doing?
Stretches. So you get the rhythm. Another quick game and go. Oh, I don't know.
It's not doing it.
Oh, do you want me to encourage them? I see people. And freeze. All eyes on me in 0 volume in 3, 2, and 1. Give yourselves a round of applause. Could everyone here at Alverno please turn to the camera and encourage our online folks to join us for the next game? We'd really like to have you, so give them a wave. You've been missed. You've been missed. We want you. Okay, third quick game. It's called Person with the shortest hair. You go first. You tell a story. You tell a story, you say a couple sentences of your story, and then all of a sudden you just can't remember the next line of the story. You say, Your partner picks it up, says a sentence or two, next, and next, and next, until I say stop. And go. Thanks, online community. In 3, 2, 1. Give yourselves a big round of applause. All right, at 0 volume, please stay standing. So when we think about the stone and what's under the stone, there's the greatness that you can imagine that's there, and you can also imagine how things could be. I'm thinking of the students, what they do that's great, and what could be not so great. And so if you remember from the activity we did this fall, we just shared a nugget about ourselves, and then we introduced our partner and said, this is what this nugget says about this person. And we got really deep into their character very quickly. So we can make guesses based on what people's character is based on just what we see them do. So what we're going to do now, not only are we going to call out what they did, so we're going to say, so if Jennifer were my partner, I'd say, Jennifer, in that game, that story, that mime game, you could have, had me knit. You could have had me do somersaults after I had you do jumping jacks. So we're going to talk about what they did, what she could have done. So we're going to look at it, not only what was great, but how it could have been different, and what that tells me about you, Jennifer. And I'm just going to get into my heart for this for all true. Like I'm in charge, I am presenting in front of this room, and you could have tried to embarrass me, and you did not at all. You gave me knitting, which was completely something I could do in front of the microphone. I just think that shows a lot of compassion for me as a guest speaker, and I think it speaks to your kindness and thoughtfulness in that moment, that you could have been capricious, but you weren't. You were just truly kind-hearted. So let's give Jennifer another power clap. Oh, one more. Oh, here's another one. Whoosh clap. So it goes like this. I've done these on family vacations, family dinners, in classroom, auditoriums of 500 people. So when we want to really show her, like give her energy, I'll say whoosh clap, and we go whoosh. Big energy. Let's give Jennifer a whoosh clap. Whoosh. Yes. Okay, so shortest person with the shortest hair. Again, I apologize. If you could please go first. What did your partner do that you appreciated? What could they have done that you did not that you would not have appreciated, and you're so glad that you didn't have to do somersaults? And what does that say about them as a partner? So shortest person with the shortest hair go first, then the partner, shortest hair, and then the partner. Each of you are going to give each other 2 recognitions, and then have a seat, please. Thank you. I'll just ask one more question. All right, if you could please have a seat. All eyes on me and 0 volume in 3, 2, and 1. Just one question I wanted to ask. Did your partner give you a recognition, tell you something about your character, what that says about you? Did anybody receive a recognition where they really felt seen for who they really are? Are you nodding? Can you share what it is? Oh, she needs a mic? Here, I can do it. I got it. Okay. So how did you feel seen?
My partner said that I was kind. I think everybody can hear me.
Oh, okay. Hi. My partner said that she recognized that I was kind and didn't take advantage of her in this situation where we really didn't know each other. We were asked to do something, and I didn't have her do anything too wacky or crazy. So.
And was she right?
Yes.
So just in that 3 little silly theater games, she zeroed right in on something that's true about you.
Yes.
And I'm guessing from the smile on your face and the twinkle in your eye, and I'm not joking, that it felt good to be seen for who you really are in that way.
Yes, it did.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Anything else you want to say about that?
I had a hard day today, and coming here and hearing that and being a part of this just really made my night. So,
okay, yeah, people want to give you. And I want to appreciate you for sticking with that and sharing that, first of all, for everyone in the room who had a hard day, and a lot of people did, and also, and I could tear up right now, for every kid who has a hard morning
Yes.
and a hard day, and then has a teacher who takes the time to see them for who they really are and call that out. And the reason why the could is so important is because when we can see how it could be worse or how not great it really could be, it gives us more, especially with the kids that really can give us fits. It gives us more. If we know it's a kid that could toss the table because he has tossed the table and this time he just slammed the door, all of a sudden there's greatness in just slamming the door. And we can see that and point that out, and we can get more advancement in the direction that we want to go. So you hanging with and sharing that was we're not going to take another person because you took us to the deep depths that we wanted to get to. So thank you for that. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
All right. So cultivating Michelangelo vision, something we need to do for each other, can shift somebody's whole day. Something we need to learn to do with our youth. These are muscles that we can exercise. But sometimes we have to also detoxify so that we can exercise these Michelangelo vision muscles. Many of our young people, particularly our young people of color, are too oftentimes treated like the stone instead of the sculpture. Too oftentimes feel like they're treated like part of the problem instead of part of the solution. And just like you said you were having a challenging day, how many of us know sometimes our children are having challenging days almost every single day? Many young people are finding themselves in socially toxic environments. And a socially toxic environment is similar to a toxic environment in nature. How many of us have seen these smokestacks and industry pumping this stuff in the air, oxides and dioxides? Sometimes being close to these industries can make the very air that we breathe poisonous. And what goes up, we know, must come down. And sometimes it comes down in the form of acid rain, which we know can deface a sculpture, deteriorate a building, even kill plants and wildlife. And sometimes these toxins find their ways in the systems. Just ask the people in Flint, Michigan, whose water system is still inundated with these toxins, right? So in a similar fashion, a socially toxic environment, according to Dr. James Garbarino and other researchers, is an environment where folks are inhibited from reaching their full potential. It inhibits their cognitive, social, emotional, physical, and do I dare say even spiritual well-being. Anyone ever been in a socially toxic environment before? These are oftentimes environments that leave bias unchecked, to perpetuate inequity and uphold the status quo. And how does that feel to be in this kind of environment? If you've been in this space before, raise your hand if you know these environments can be kind of depressing. Some folks may feel some hopelessness, some anxiety, some despair. According to researchers out of Harvard, they have a term that they call toxic stress. When you're constantly feeling these negative emotions, the long-term impacts can be a shortened lifespan, right? How many of us know this can also not just impact you on an intrapersonal level, but also impact relationships? Anybody seen that happen before? Someone's in a socially toxic place, and then they come home and they're taking it out on everybody else. And how many of us know that sometimes you get enough people in a socially toxic space, it starts to get into the system of that institution. Now, social toxicity is something that's not just affecting our youth, it's affecting all of us. And one of the things that reigns its toxic ideology all over all of us, all of the time, is mass media. And it's evident that this ideology is toxic about our babies, particularly our young kids of color, by looking at the types of stories that come out about them. Stories like this one, which just came out in Chicago not too long ago.
City's south side, it happened at East 74th, as an 18-year-old man and 16-year-old girl were hit while standing on the sidewalk. The male's in good condition while the girl's expected to recover. And kids on the street as young as 4 were there to see it all unfold and had a disturbing reaction.
No, I'm not scared of nothing.
When you get older, you gonna stay away from all these guns?
No.
No?
No.
What do you want to do when you get older?
I'm gonna have me a gun.
Because I live right here and I don't want none of my family members to get shot.
That is very scary indeed. So far, no suspects are in custody.
So this is a story about a shootout. But what's the story inside the story? Who's the real focus of this story? Little boy. What does he say he wants? A gun. And the way that it's framed, I mean, if you're, I don't know, maybe you're going to be a teacher teaching in this neighborhood, or maybe you're a new police officer getting ready. This is going to be a new neighborhood that you're patrolling. Is this young man in this community framed like part of the problem or part of the solution? Let's be real. Say it again. But how many of us know sometimes social media is not just something that, mass media is not just something that's used for negative. Sometimes social media, different truths can get exposed. So as it turned out, this 4-year-old boy, his auntie was there, and she was excited to see that he was being interviewed. He was going to be on the nighttime news. So she had her phone, and she videotaped the interview. And here's part of the interview. The quality's not so good, but here's part of the interview that got left out.
Damn. When you get older, you gonna stay away from all these guns?
No.
No?
No.
What do you want to do when you get older?
I'm gonna have me a gun.
You are? Why you want to do that? You know what happens when
I'm gonna be the police.
Okay, well then you can have one.
So from the perspective of a 4-year-old, is he trying to communicate that he wants to be seen as being part of the problem or part of the solution? Check out this statistic. Youth criminality has actually decreased 40% since the crack epidemic in the mid-1990s. But the portrayal of youth, particularly youth of color, as criminals in mass media has gone up 600%. Now, according to Nielsen and other researchers who are looking at how much time folks are spending in front of a TV, they average that most Americans spend between 20 and 30 hours watching entertainment television. Clearly, most of these folks are not educators because we don't have enough time to watch TV that often. But if someone does not have young people of color in their life, and they're taking in this much news day in and day out, 20 to 30 hours a week, month in and month out, year in and year out, what's the default when they see a young person of color? Part of the problem or part of the solution? Can we be real? Public education. The majority of teachers in public education are who? Coming from where? Urban spaces or rural and suburban spaces? What about the majority of students in public education? Where are they coming from? From urban contexts. The majority of students in public ed are students of color. So if teachers are not detoxifying from poisonous ideology, if they're not going through some training to become multiculturally competent, because how many of us know you can be a white woman from rural Wisconsin and become multiculturally competent? But if you're not undergoing this kind of training and this kind of intentionality, how many of us know that teachers can disproportionately discipline our young people of color much more often than our white students? The research suggests that young people of color are suspended and expelled starting in as early as preschool at 3 times the rate of white students. Now think about that. Preschool, 4 years old. going through their entire K through 12 experience, not being seen as the sculpture, but being treated as the stone. Not pointing out the good stuff, but defaulting to like, you're going to be one of those kids that ends up right down in the state prison, right? Maybe not saying that, but how many of us know nonverbal communication is powerful? According to research coming out of NYU, young people of color are 6 times, how many times? 6 times more likely to be mislabeled as special education as a white student. So many of us will get these labels of being LD and learning deficient, to the point when I moved to Texas, I was a fierce advocate. They tried to put me in regular classes, but I had already internalized that label. And so I advocated fiercely to be in the slowest reading and math class, right? How many of us know young people are internalizing these labels a lot, right? And how does that make them feel to be treated as criminals? How does that make young people feel when they're treated as stupid? Raise your hand if you think they may feel a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of depression, a little bit of hopelessness, maybe a little bit of despair, maybe some of this toxic emotional energy, right? And we know that young people who are being suspended and put in special education are 8 times more likely to drop out. And the dropout is more likely to end up incarcerated. This is what many call the school-to-prison pipeline. And even as we stand in the great state of Wisconsin, a black man is 10 times more likely to be tried, convicted, and serve a longer sentence than his white counterpart who committed the same crime with the same record. How many of us know this needs to stop? So many people use this term when I share my story. You know, man, you beat the odds, you know? As a kid who got kicked out of school, I went to 13 different schools before high school, right? A kid who was labeled as special education, right? But I was fortunate to have folks with Michelangelo vision and this nurtured heart willing to engage me. They taught me there's a difference between schooling and education. How many of us know that to be true? Right? Schooling prepares young people to solve problems on a test. Education, they taught me, prepares young people to solve problems in their life and in the world. And when I realized that education could empower me to make a difference in my world, I started loving to learn. To the point I went to UW-Madison, created my own major, and I will never, ever forget. I may have Alzheimer's and dementia, but I'll never forget walking across that stage. And they tell everybody in the beginning, they say, please don't make any noise until everyone's received their diploma. And then they called out my name, Roberto Rivera. And the whole section of the Cole Center went crazy. Ah! There was like those air horns going off. I'm like, dang, man, this is a little embarrassing, but I felt kind of good getting my fake diploma. You know, you don't get your real diploma until later on. But it was a bittersweet moment for me because I thought back to some of the friends I had growing up. Growing up in Bayview, in Madison, in the south side of Houston. Friends who were more talented than me, more brilliant than me, who were not there. In fact, many of them were dead or in jail or trapped under the canopy of addiction. And I realized at that moment, having my fake diploma, that my purpose is not to beat the odds. My purpose is to change the odds. Anybody with me on that? And I realized the way that I could do that most powerfully out of all the industries that are out there is to go into education and to honor the Michelangelos in my life. And so what I realized is the people I loved engaging with the most were those kids who are deemed at risk, the ones who are deemed unreachable. And what I saw in these youth is they were thirsty, as they might say on the west side of Chicago. They were thirsty to be engaged in holistic, strength-based, and culturally relevant ways. And when we started treating these young people as a solution to be released instead of a problem to be fixed, they started to respond to us. They started to thrive academically and socially. And I started realizing, okay, maybe I can have a bigger impact if I get more education. So I went back to grad school. How many of us have made that decision before? Whew, sometimes it can be quite a mountain, right? And so I started tipping the scales a little bit on my experience, combining it with empirical evidence and social emotional learning. Raise your hand if you've heard of that before. Character education. Raise your hand if you've heard of that before. I hope so. Culturally relevant pedagogy. Social justice education and youth development. So I had my PhD funded by CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning. And what they teach you in grad school going after these PhDs is it's important to ask questions. How many of us know it can be a little dangerous if you start asking the wrong question or the right question? And I started asking questions of, what does it look like to create the conditions where all young people can thrive under our care? What does it look like to cultivate a critical hope in our youth? And almost spiritually, I was led to the work of Paulo Freire. Anyone ever heard of Paulo Freire before? Brazilian educator, the godfather of critical pedagogy. He may look like Santa Claus's cousin, but this guy is no joke. He's an OG, teaching his students that they can read the word and also read the world, right? That they're not the actors in somebody's play called reality, but they can become the authors of a new reality. And while he was teaching his students, the corrupt government of Brazil at the time felt that he was a threat. So they had him imprisoned. And then he's in jail, and what does he do with the other prisoners? He's getting them to read the word and to read the world and to think critically and to think about how they can become agents of change. So then you know what the government does? They exile him. This is a bad educator right now. Turn to your neighbor and say, hey neighbor, are you a bad educator? All right, got to make sure you're still with me this evening because I know it's been a long day. Some of y'all have been working all day, right? And so I started getting into the work and realizing, man, what if we could get our students to read the word, to read the world? What if we could get our students to ask the question, not am I smart, but how am I smart? What if we could treat our students not as an object to be changed, but treat them authentically from the heart, as Tammy was modeling this stuff, as an agent of change, right? So we started engaging with these young people, and some of the outcomes have been tremendous. We've seen GPAs go up a full point cumulatively in 10 weeks. Working in some of the roughest schools on the south and the west side of Chicago, we've seen attendance go from 55% to 96% in 1 month. Working in alternative schools, how many of us know you have alternative schools and then you have the alternative schools? Some of these schools, you don't get invited in if you just get kicked out of one school. We couldn't get in, Miss Jackie. We'd have to be kicked out of at least 2 schools. They have very high standards. But teaching everyone this holistic approach, this culturally relevant approach that I'm going to teach you tonight, in the first year, how many of us know it's even important to engage bus drivers and cafeteria workers and support staff? Everyone got engaged. In the first year, they had 100% graduation rate. First time ever in the history of the school. And then now, I went from LD to PhD. We're publishing peer-reviewed academic journal articles connecting social-emotional learning to social justice, youth development, incorporating the mindsets. And so how many of us know sometimes you experience a little bit of success and that passion starts to build a little bit more. And so when I combine my passion with the passion of Scott Schickler, anybody see Scott Schickler when he did his thing? We combined forces with a team from Egypt, from Panama, Puerto Rico, Atlanta, and yes, even rural Texas is up in the mix in here. We started scaling our efforts, and last year we impacted 35 states and over 350,000 students in 1 year. But our goals are high. Part of the mindset approach is we dream big. We dream what? Big. So our goal collectively is to reach 3.5 million youth, to reach the 1.5 million youth that are slated to drop out, to try to cut that dropout rate in half, and to conservatively in the first year save our country $310 billion. So we're on a mission. Anybody else on a mission? Like the Blues Brothers, I'm on a mission from God. Right? And so one of the questions that I want to kind of guide our time together is this one. How do we create an educational ecosystem so all youth can thrive? Now, I know we have a lot of experience in this room. So we've designed this time to not have this just be a monologue, but to have it be a dialogue. Raise your hand if you've been working with young people at least 5 years. Keep them up if it's been 10 years or longer, 15 years or longer, 20 years or longer, 25 years or longer. Can we clap it up for some veteran educators in the room? So I just estimated we have about 700 years of experience in the room. Take a look around the room. This is what 700 years looks like of experience. So I want to make sure we tap into the collective wisdom of the group, all right? So quick question, just because I know it's good to have these professional pauses as we ponder some of these ideas. What has been said so far that resonates with you and connects with what you've already learned at LACCS so far, all right? What's been said that already confirms what you know to be true? Let's take a moment, turn to our neighbor. Give you 90 seconds. Go. Give me the peace sign, and that'll let me know that you know that I know to share how to get it.
Your presentation, it's on our web and online binder. Okay. Do you want it shared out to everyone or just the community?
So I'm going to share a link.
Okay, perfect.
And then they can get it there. And then I just published.
I wasn't sure if you wanted
I published a chapter in an academic book.
Okay.
Combining positive youth development and culturally relevant pedagogy. So we're going to make that available for free to everyone. And then we just completed a white paper talking about equity and SEL being systemically implemented.
So so this group is not just our LACCS community. So if you share it out, then it's out. But if you want it just for LACCS community, we put it in our little. Okay. So up to you. If you have any
Let's do D, all of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So just remember to engage those offsite people. Also, just talk to them every once in a while. And then
you can tell from the body language they're kind of.
They can hear you. Oh, okay. And then
remind me where they are. They're Beaver. River. Yeah. River
Falls.
River Falls. And your daughters left before I could.
They did. I think you bored them. No, they'll be back. They're probably going to explore. If anybody shares out now, they'll need the mic. Always, we need the mic so that the remote site. So up to you.
Thank you.
There was one point where.
All right, so we're going to put a fist up in the air like this. We're engaging in a revolutionary act. Not just having conversation, but what Paulo Freire would call critical dialogue. Right? And so my role here, this kind of lets me off the hook a little bit. I'm not here to teach you anything new. I'm coming in the spirit of Galileo. I'm here to remind you of what you already know to be true and to encourage you to act on it. All right? So where are we going to go from here? What I want to do is give a quick theoretical, kind of empirical foundation for this approach, combining SEL and equity. I want to share a case study, taking these ideas, putting them into practice, and then I want to get into some very practical things that you all can implement tomorrow when you go back to your school systems. You're all right with that? Thumbs up. If you're against that, thumbs down. If you all right with it, you can give me one of these. All right. So the foundation of this whole frame is coming out of social emotional learning. So I'm going to give you a dissertation on the past, present, and future of SEL in 7 minutes. Y'all ready? So please put your seatbelts on. Make sure your tray tables and seats are in their upright position because we're getting ready to take off. All right, here we go. So social and emotional learning, this phenomenon that's just so popular in public education, can be traced back to a book called Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of this book. Raise your other hand if you've ever read this book. So he popularized this notion that if we want to engage young folks in a rigorous way, we can't just engage them on a cognitive level. We have to engage them in a social, emotional level as well. Now, Daniel Goleman, he hopscotches through a lot of different circles and spheres. He's done a lot of research and published a lot of stuff with the Harvard Business Review. Anyone ever heard of that? And what he came to find out, looking at some of the CEOs and top executives in these big Fortune 500 companies, is that these are not the smartest people in the world. But oftentimes, these are people who have a very high level of what he calls EI, or emotional intelligence. Other researchers have come out. And what we now know is that 65%, what percent? 65. Of our elementary school students will end up in a job that doesn't exist yet. 50% of our middle school and high school students, what percent? Will end up in a career that we have no frame for even understanding quite yet. So how do we prepare our young people to thrive in the 21st century, to get into these careers, industries, and jobs that don't even exist yet? Well, what the research is pointing us to is that young people have to cultivate these 21st century skills. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of this before. What are they? Pop quiz. Say it again. Collaboration. Let's go. What else? Critical thinking. What else? Problem solving. Communication. Problem solving. Collaboration. Communication. The heart of 21st century skills are social and emotional learning skills, right? So this movement has required a leader to be at the helm, to lead the charge, and that's become CASEL, C-A-S-E-L, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of this organization before. And so their mission is to make social emotional learning part of the core purpose of what is taught in public education around the nation and around the world. CASEL has identified 5 core competencies. Another pop quiz. What are they? Self-awareness. Being aware of your own emotions, your strengths, your weaknesses. What else? Self-management. Being able to regulate, manage your emotions, set and achieve positive goals. What else? Responsible decision making. Yep. Solving problems in different contexts, knowing how to act in different spaces. What else? 2 more. Social awareness, and then I'm putting you on pause just for now because I know you got this, girl. Social awareness, being aware of the emotions of others, having empathy, and last but not least, positive relationship skills. Building relationships with folks from diverse backgrounds and sustaining these relationships. So, why is this discourse community, why is this research so hot right now? Well, what has been demonstrated is that young people who learn these competencies, how many are there real quick? Who learn these 5 core competencies, they do better in pro-social behaviors, have less antisocial behaviors, less emotional distress, fewer conduct problems. And let's read the part that's underlined together. Demonstrate improved. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Let's say it one more time. Now, they have more research than the positive youth development movement, the self-esteem movement, and the character education movement put together as it relates to this piece, right? Over 300 studies in the meta-analysis point to this. And a lot of character education, how many of us know, is building these social and emotional competencies, right? So now this thing is spreading like wildfire. Now we have districts that are systemically implementing SEL all over the nation. It started with a few, and now we have over 28 districts systemically implementing SEL, getting SEL directors, embedding this into the mission of the organization, getting schools to adopt these programs. And now we even have a cross-state initiative the Castle is leading, where entire states are adopting social and emotional learning through their departments of instruction, right? And Wisconsin is one of these. Raise your hand if you were at the SEL conference for DPI in Madison last year. So a lot of these states are even creating state standards. And the state standards are organized around 3 goals. One goal is the intrapersonal goal. Everyone say intrapersonal. This is connecting self-awareness and self-management in that category. The second goal is interpersonal. Connecting social awareness and positive relationships. The third goal is institutional. Making responsible decisions, creative problem solving in different contexts. But now SEL finds itself at a crossroads. They find themselves where? At a where? And here's why. For so long, SEL has been trucking along. And for many years, the students have mirrored the teachers. But we know now, as of 2013, 2014, what is the majority of teacher? What's the demographic? And what's the majority of student? Students of color, right? So we have a traditional approach to SEL, which is claimed to be very universal, generalizable, dare I say, even colorblind in its ideology. And if SEL will continue down this path, I believe what will happen is we will exacerbate the school-to-prison pipeline. And here's why. In claiming to be colorblind, what's actually happening is that teachers are enforcing a white Eurocentric way of being upon our students of color, forcing them to assimilate or to acculturate or to experience what Angela Valenzuela calls subtractive schooling, which means that they believe that in order to excel academically, they have to divorce themselves from their cultural heritage, right? There's an overemphasis of self-regulation and self-management and mindfulness. Now, I have nothing against mindfulness. My wife teaches yoga, and I'm trying to become more mindful myself, right? But sometimes there can be such an overemphasis in this domain that if young people are in a toxic environment, if they find themselves in an environment that is oppressive, they feel that their only option is to breathe and conform to that reality. But how many of us know we're not called to conform to the realities around us? And so there's another approach. And this is an approach that we're calling transformational SEL. What kind of SEL? Now, transformational SEL, I believe, can disrupt the school-to-prison pipeline because it promotes social and emotional competence and cultural competence in staff and students. It nurtures young people's racial, ethnic, and cultural identity. And it supports young people developing a critical hope, a sense of agency. So if they find themselves in a socially toxic environment, if they find themselves in a place that feels like it's closing in and oppressive, they know they have the power to transform that environment. And so many of us are pushing with our research, with our speaking, a shift of the field to incorporate social and emotional learning with equity. Now, I know when it comes to this notion of equity, there's a lot of discussion about folks either being all in or all out of this work, right? It can be very dichotomous in some of the discussion. So I think the growth mindset and the mindsets in general can help us conceptualize this a little differently. Who's familiar with the growth mindset? What is the growth mindset? Another pop quiz. Speak loudly, please.
Growth mindset it's basically not looking at what's gone wrong. It's like looking at failures or mistakes and seeing what you can learn from them to become better. So you're actually relishing the mistakes more than the successes.
Yep. Big piece of it is learning how to fail forward. You make a mistake, how do you learn from that? How do you reincorporate that and do better, right? Growth mindset says that intelligence is kind of like a muscle. The more you exercise it, what happens? And so I think this can be helpful as we discuss this work towards equity, because I believe that all of us find ourselves somewhere on a continuum of practice. The important thing with the growth mindset is that you commit. You don't have to master a new topic right away, but you must commit to improving your practice step by step. And in the same way, this equity work requires the price of admission is that we commit to the process. We don't have to master it right away, but step by step we have to improve with the goal of building that strength within us, within our systems, so that all young people can thrive under our care. So combining the growth mindset with the 7 mindsets, y'all didn't know I was going to have y'all sweating up in here too a little bit. I'm going to give you a workout plan for justice. Y'all ready for this? I'm going to give you some yoga moves, if you will, to combine SEL and equity, to implement this on an interpersonal, and institutional way. If y'all with me to go a little higher, I want you to say, let's go higher. If y'all ready to go a little deeper, I want you to say, let's go deeper. So we're going to talk about meeting the interpersonal goals of SEL, bridging this cultural gap through the growth mindset and passion first. We're going to talk about recognizing the cultural sparks of our youth, helping them to see that brilliance in themselves and fostering a healthy identity. We're going to talk about meeting the interpersonal goals, bridging the relationship gap. How many of us know there's some generational gaps that are persisting? Using the mindsets that we are connected, right, Reina? Fostering the social emotional competence and cultural competence in our staff and our students. And then we're going to talk about meeting the SEL goal on the institutional level. How many of us know there's some power gaps going on in education and society as a whole? And how we can exercise our 100% accountable and live to give mindset in nurturing authentic youth voice and supporting young people, not just in coping, but in healing. So, back to the professional pause. So far, what is one thing that you've learned? What is one thing you still have questions about? Take 90 seconds, reflect, and we'll go a little deeper. Let's go. All right, family, coming back. LACCS family. So you'll also notice that we have our Twitter hashtag here at 7 Mindsets. So if you have insights, if you have questions that we don't get to here, we can follow up this way as well. All right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to get into the more practical side of the praxis. If you like practical, give me your thumbs up. All right. If you're more theoretical, a theoretician, give me that other side thumbs up. All right. All right. We need both. We need both. We got to bridge the gap. So now I'm just going to quickly share a case study about how we first got started discovering some of these ideas, putting some of these ideas into practice, not doing anything perfect, but trying to learn step by step, right? So we actually got our start, and I've published on this, so I can't tell you the district, but somewhere in Wisconsin, I'll tell you that much, all right? And so for a while there, I was a director at a teen center in a city. I won't tell you how big it was. And so I'm a director of a teen center, and this is when I realized I was, LD. I just learned different. And we started doing festivals and concerts, and I realized that I never knew I had this talent, but I could write hip-hop theatrical productions. We got invited to the Kennedy Center. I think Lin Miranda and Hamilton, they owe me some money, actually. I saw the show. They took some of my ideas. So, if I get that money, we're going to hook up Amy and the LACCS community, so y'all wait for that. And so we have young superstars in the troupe who are performing nationally. They're opening up for Congress people at conferences. They're being interviewed for television and radio and newspaper articles with their insights being shared. But then they're coming to us because their experiences in school are very different. And they're telling us that the administration, the staff, is treating them like they're criminals, treating them like they're stupid. And so we're like, wait a minute, what? Y'all superstars, right? So eventually we get the idea to bring this holistic, strength-based, and culturally relevant approach into the schools. I know it's a crazy idea, right? So we get some funding. How many of us know funding sometimes is an important piece of the puzzle? And we create some curriculum, some pedagogy, some solutions, and we have to pilot this out in the school space, right? So we meet with the superintendent, and the superintendent, as we learn, was having some crisis. Now, we didn't realize that, the Chinese say that crisis is, an opportunity for growth, but it was. And they had a school that was giving a lot of heat to the district and to the soup. This school, the newspaper was writing a series of articles about how young people in this middle school were smoking weed and getting into fights and getting recruited into gangs. And so the superintendent told us that he had tried every intervention. He was naming them all off. I didn't know half the acronyms he was talking about. And he says, we might as well try this hip-hoppity leadership stuff you're talking about, So with his blessing, he sends us into what he calls the worst school in the district. And we meet with the principals. And we ascertain that a majority of the issues going on in the school are happening from 10% of the population. Now, this just so happens to be that 10% that's all kind of crammed together in the back of the school in their House 2 model, right? And so as we get closer to House 2, it seems like the lights are kind of flickering in the hall, and it's like they're in the dark dungeon of the back of the school. How many of us have seen that before? And we get into House 2, which has about 120 students. And we quickly realize this is where they're warehousing all their students of color, with every label under the sun. EBD, ADD, ADHD, ODD, some of them, had XYZ, maybe down with OPP too, I don't know. And so what they needed was not another intervention to fix them. They didn't need prevention. What they needed was something new. They needed invention. And so they needed to experience themselves in a new way. So before we started anything with them, we did an all-school assembly. Because how many of us know young people are asking, what is the purpose of what is happening here? So we had to let them know what the purpose was. So we brought in different artists, a little edutainment session happened. I shared some stories. And we let the young folks know we're creating this leadership academy, and we're looking for a few good, elite young women and men to participate in the first cohort. The whole school signs up. They all want to be down. This is on a Friday. On a Monday, we show up to House 2. Now, you should have seen the faces of the students when we walked into House 2. They couldn't believe that we chose them. But what we had to articulate to them is that they had tremendous influence over the school, over the city, and we wanted them to use their influence for good. That they had these sparks of passion that had been overlooked. That they had these voices that needed to be heard. So we started working with House 2 every week. One of the first things that we talked about was developing a critical consciousness. How many of us know it's important for young people to think critically? And to start thinking critically about some of the messages that they're getting from social media. We help young people to realize that they are conducting and creating the song of their life. And a lot of different things are trying to influence that mix. And so we encourage them to learn about the history. How many of us know there's a difference between Texas textbook history and the people's history? So learning about social movements, interviewing community elders and elders in their family. We started getting the young people to ask the question, not am I smart? What question do we get them to ask? Say that one more time. We started working with the teachers, getting them to do social emotional check-ins. How many of us know teachers have a lot going on in their lives, right? Parents getting older. Sometimes partners are acting crazy. Sometimes children are causing a lot of stress. And one of the teachers, Miss Monica, shared with the group that her father was dying of cancer. And, at an appropriate time, she shared that with the class. She teared up. And what do you think happened to the students? They said, oh, we getting real like that in here? And then they started sharing what's happening in their lives. Different grief, traumatic events, parents locked up, growing up in poverty, living in Wisconsin in the winter with no heat. And one of the best ways that they expressed this was through poetry, was through art. A lot of these young people were prolific artists. And no one had ever told them that these were manifestations of intelligence. So we started connecting these various forms of intelligence with ways that they could study. Some of the kids into graffiti, we said, well, look, now you can take visual notes. Imagine that. Some of the kids who like to rap said, okay, well, incorporate the vocabulary words you need to know for the quiz in your rap. Started doing raps about the ecosystem and science. Finally, we had the support of the principal for the youth to do a service learning project. How many of us know about service learning? Where they identified a root issue going on in the school community and mobilized the assets and resources to address this in a new way. So they came to us after they did some interviewing and reflecting, and they said the core issue is everybody thinks we are part of the problem. So what we need to do is we need to rebrand ourselves. And we think the best way we can do that is we want to hold a talent show that we're going to host for the whole school, and then we want to do another show for the entire community. So they started inviting their peers. They are the ones who moderated the whole experience. There was monologues and dancing and poetry. They even did a rap. And I think one of the choruses went something like, it's not a new but an old thing. I'm working hard, man, trying to let my soul bling. I ain't concerned what your goal brings. I got a purpose in this more than trying to hold things. You serving them death, I'm serving them life. You serving them wrong, I'm serving them right. You either part of the problem or the solution. So let's solve our problems and start a movement. They got a standing ovation. Teachers are coming up, tears in their eyes. Couldn't believe that Dee, Isaiah, Abraham, all these young folks would get up, organize this, and be so powerful and so positive. Now they're talking to their parents, probably for the first time, about the positive things that their kids are doing. Isaiah's dad had just gotten out of jail. I can't make this up. This was like a scene out of a movie or something. But now we live in a day and an age where it seems like if we don't have no data, what we're doing don't even matter. Fortunately, we had some data. We saw attendance went up, behavior issues went down. We saw that GPAs went up a full point cumulatively in that time. So we brought this to the superintendent, and he said, okay, let's have a town hall. Brought in all the principals, all the stakeholders, and we had our PowerPoints and data sets, but the youth found out we were doing this meeting at their school about their program and their movement, so they wanted to be there. And at the end, the young people are asking if they can share, so we're like, okay, sure. A young man gets up, I don't know what he's going to say. He said, my brother is in a gang. I was going to get jumped to be in that gang this semester, but I'm not going to do that anymore. Because now I realize I have a dream. I want to be a recording engineer, and I need to graduate from high school to go to this college to get that degree. Another young man said, you know, my family name Johnson, we have a bad reputation in the neighborhood. My brother, my father, I'm here to change that. So people hear that name and they think of something positive. So I'm not getting into fights anymore. Another young man, he's like, okay, y'all getting real? He said, well, all I know is I used to smoke some big old blunts, man. I would put some big fat. I'm like, oh, there's too much information. Yeah, man, we get some good kush, some purple kush. I'm like, dude, we don't. But he said, you know what? I'm not smoking anymore. By now, the chief of staff is like, is this for real? So she starts probing. She says, well, what's different? He says, well, I feel like I have hope now. She says, what kind of hope is this? Hope you have today and it's gone tomorrow when you wake up? He said, lady, he didn't know who she was. Chief of staff, this is a hope I'm going to have for the rest of my life. These young folks ended up getting on the honor roll. It disrupted the narrative that they couldn't learn so deeply that all the teachers in the school were like, okay, do you guys offer PDs? And we're like, I don't know. We ain't thought about it. This was early on, right? So we started doing PDs with the teachers. And some of the students on the student council were having their parents call in. Well, you know, my son Johnny's on the student council. He's a leader. How come he's not in this leadership program? And this started getting adopted school-wide. And this was the first school launching to the national model that we're doing today. So it went from one of the worst schools in a relatively short amount of time to one of the best schools in the district. So as we examine this, I want to look at this through a theoretical lens so we can be very specific about the practical takeaways. We know that one of the theories undergirding social emotional learning is positive youth development. What is one of the theories underneath SEL? Taking a strength-based approach. Maybe you've heard of this before. A holistic approach to engaging youth, right? Understanding their developmental processes. They need different things along the different spaces and places of their development. From the research, we know that young people need 3 things in order to thrive. You already know this. They need a relationship with an adult other than a parent. Raise your hand if you know that to be true. They need to know they have a spark or something that they're passionate about. Raise your other hand if you know that to be true. They need to know they have a voice. They can contribute to the things that they're a part of, that matter to them. Put both hands in the air if you know this to be true. All right, both hands in the air because you really do care. So I want you to turn to a different neighbor this time, or you can talk around the table. Maybe we'll take the whole table approach. Where do you see, if at all, some of these ideas shining through in the case study? We'll take a few minutes here and we'll continue on and go. And for my people who are chiming in via webinar, River Creek, River Falls, I want you guys to also do a little sharing. Do they have a microphone they can share with us? Okay, I want to have at least one person share out with us one of the insights. Okay, family, so we're going to bring it back here. Put a finger in the air if you need another moment. Okay, you have bonus time because of this young lady right there. Okay, as we come back here, family, where, if at all, do you see some of these ideas come up? And as they say in the west side of Chicago, please don't be scared.
I saw the sparks come up when it was mentioned about the kids and the graffiti. You could turn that into the visual, the note taking, and put in the rap with the vocabulary words in school to learn, and that's why I saw the spark with the kids.
Absolutely. Snap it up if you agree with that. And that's one thing that we find is sometimes these sparks, these multiple forms of intelligence, that they're embedded in a culture or a tradition that's different than our own. And if we don't have that cultural sensitivity, sometimes it's easy to overlook that spark of genius that is there. And so maybe they're in a graffiti and you think, oh no, we gotta drop the hammer on them. Well, how many of us know that's a transferable skill, doing graphic design? We have young folks in LA who are graffiti writers who learn how to code and do graphic design, getting jobs with EA Sports making $80,000 out of high school. We got to find the flame and fan it. Other insights, other thoughts? Yeah, wish I was making that too. Other insights? Okay, what about my folks from River Falls? You're not up yet. I got a hand here. I'm coming to y'all next.
When looking at the relationships with the adults, we just talked a little bit about the way that this, I don't know what you want to call it, an initiative or whatever, was rolled out, really amplified your relationship with them, and that the fact that it was marketed toward all students to begin with, because even if you call it leadership, if it was leadership and you were only walking in one back hallway, that's not leadership either. So acknowledging that these kids have those skills and aren't necessarily, you mentioned like a really high achieving student who may have been high achieving because he's good at putting his names on different papers to sign up for things, and those aren't leadership qualities. So really gaining that trust with students by pointing out things that have been traditionally punished as some of their greatest attributes, I think that really went a long way.
If you agree, snap it up, right? So not just saying, oh, this is a leadership program or initiative, but backing that thing up. Young folks can tell if you're just, talking about it. They want to know if you're going to back it up and walk about it as well. And they will oftentimes surprise us. I have to go to Target frequently and get new pairs of socks because they blow my socks off repeatedly. Sorry, it's a long day. Bad jokes start coming out. All right, my folks from River Falls, what is one of the insights? Do you see any relationships, spark, voice? Where are we at with this?
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you perfect. Thank you.
All right, we really heard a lot of the relationships piece, and that really connected with a lot of what we try to focus on here. And in fact, one of our main district goals for all buildings within the district is increasing connectedness for traditionally marginalized students. And so relationships is really a big starting point for a lot of us. And in a lot of our conversation here, we really felt that those relationships have to come before you can get to some of those other areas.
If you agree, let's snap it up. Great insights. Thank you, River Falls. And I would totally agree. And when I share some of these ideas with some of the top scholars in SEL and positive youth development, they're like, man, without the relationship, how do you find the spark? How do you cultivate the voice? So we're going to go a little deeper with some practical ideas. Before we do that, let me share this. The research coming out of the Search Institute, looking at these three things, looking at a sample representative of the demographics of youth throughout the nation, so they generalize this, right? They come to the conclusion that only 30% of all adolescents are strong in any one area. 30%. How many do you think are strong in all three areas? Their conclusion, 7%. Therefore, what percentage of youth are not thriving? 93%. Imagine if you ordered a pizza from Domino's and they only showed up 7% of the time. Would Domino's stay in business? What if you're casting your vote and that only counts 7% of the time? That may be the case if Russia did indeed hack our system. I don't know. What happens if the Packers game only comes on the evening channel 7% of the time? We're going to have broken TVs. We might have a full-blown cheesehead revolution up in this state. But yet here we are in 2019, and 93% of our babies are just surviving, limping along. And how many of us know sometimes it's not always obvious in the physical? Because they may have Gucci bags and, 3,000 friends on social media, but still socially, emotionally relegated to just trying to barely survive, right? So what I want to do is I want to operationalize this theory. Because how many of us know we can do better than 7% of our youth thriving? I want to share some practices, some ideas, so we can have 70%, 80, 90% or more of our young people thriving under our care. You ready to go a little higher? Let's say higher. So again, implementing this mindset-based transformative SEL to operationalize this theory. We're going to get into it a little bit from the inter, intra, and institutional domains. So looking first at the interpersonal goal. Realizing that there is a relational gap that must be bridged. We can bridge this gap through the we are connected mindset. What mindset? I got tired of standing over there. They're going to have to move the camera over here. I know the camera might be set over there, but I got to come say what's up to y'all. How do we foster social and emotional competence and cultural competence concurrently in our staff and in our students? So let's go a little deeper with this piece. The relationship coming out of the positive youth development literature suggests that all young people need to have a relationship with someone other than an adult. How many of us have any adolescents in our lives? Any parents in here? Anyone ever have the situation where you're telling your teenage daughter or son something over and over and they like blow you off? And then somebody, a neighbor, a grandparent, a teacher, a coach will say the exact same thing. And it's like the most profound thing they've ever heard. Has that ever happened to someone? So we know that teenagers developmentally are getting a little distance from their parents. They're trying to figure out this identity piece on their own, independently, right? So an outside adult other than a parent can have tremendous influence in this season of development. But what the research suggests is roughly only 19%. What percentage? 19. Only 19% of our youth have this positive developmental relationship with an adult that they can go to in a time of crisis, an adult that can see the good in them, an adult that can push them to taking a positive risk. That's what percentage of youth do not have this. Say it again, Craig. 81%. What that is telling me is that young people are around adults all the time. But oftentimes our young people are around adults who default to becoming old people instead of becoming elders. So let me make the distinction. An old person only sees the stone. They see young people as potentially and quite probably being part of the problem. They have a very fixed mindset about the world. If they ever share anything, and these folks are not very vulnerable, they only share what works, and what do they plan and hope young people will do? The exact same thing. And when it comes time to taking action, old people will always play the background. But then there's elders. And an elder can see the sculpture inside of the stone. An elder knows that young people can become part of the solution. An elder has a growth mindset. They know that problems do evolve and solutions need to evolve, and so they'll be more vulnerable about what worked and what didn't work. And when it comes time for young people to take action, elders lock arms with our young people and they walk this thing out. How many of us know our youth need more elders in their life? And we've come up with a term, yelder, a young elder. You can be an elder when you're 19, so I don't want anybody getting too, right? Whether you're 19 or 91, you can be an elder. Now imagine this bridge right here, drawbridge in Chicago over the Chicago River. Anyone ever been in Chicago before? I think it's a great metaphor for bridging the generational gap because it requires effort on both sides. It requires adults to make the conscientious decision to become elders, and it requires youth to make the decision to sample consciousness, to sample from the example of the elders, and remix it in a way that's relevant to the contemporary present. LACCS family, what will happen if we can combine the wisdom and the experience of the elders with the knowledge, the innovation, creativity, may I even dare say, swag of our youth? Is it possible that we could maybe solve some of these long-standing social problems that we've been facing for so long? And so to be an elder requires some work. It requires some exercise, some intentionality, if you will, because elders have this ability to see the sculpture inside of the stone, and that's kind of hard to do when we're all being rained on with this socially toxic ideology all the time. An elder is someone who has to be in tune with their implicit bias. And I must say that we all have implicit biases growing up, living in this society. Definition of implicit bias. It's not intentional, but it can impact how we judge others based on factors such as race, ability, gender, culture, and language. We know in early childhood settings, implicit biases can affect how providers or educators perceive and respond to children, which can lead to unfair differences in the use of exclusionary disciplinary practices such as suspension and expulsion. What are some of the words that jump out of this definition? Let's popcorn it out. What is implicit bias? Give me a word. Either from here or your own word. Let's go. It could be gender or culture. What else? Not intentional. Perceived. Say it again. It can be impactful. One of my colleagues in the field, Dr. Bill de la Cruz, says an implicit bias is a false story that starts building a wall in between us and the person that we could have relationship with. Right? Others have framed implicit bias as blind spots. Anyone ever rent a car before? And they have you sign the line, okay, you're taking responsibility unless you're going to pay us $9.99, $99, $99. You are taking responsibility for the blind spots on this car. Right? And the car, every car, maybe you get a Hummer if you're platinum status over there, I don't know. All these cars have blind spots. But there's good news. My grandmother, she drove a really big car. I think it was more like a pontoon on wheels. And Grandma had these extra little mirrors that she put on the side mirrors to try to eliminate some of the blind spots because she couldn't turn her head too far that way. And so there's good news, family, is that we can do the work to begin to minimize and reduce the blind spots in our life. Reach out to me afterwards. I can share with you a free assessment looking at our multitude of implicit biases put out by Harvard Education School. But if we want to cultivate this Michelangelo vision, it's going to take effort. It's going to take some work on behalf of the adults. And I would not be authentic if I didn't tell you, even as someone who is maybe more attuned with some of the youth culture and hip hop of some of the youth, that we had our own implicit biases coming into the space. And what we had to do is not just become aware of our implicit biases, but we had to also cultivate the vision of what could be. And what helped us to cultivate this Michelangelo vision is to go through the people's history to remind ourselves that it's young people, particularly young people of color, have been at the forefront of every major social movement in the last 50 years. If we reread history of civil rights, we see that this movement is not just about a few exemplary individuals, but ordinary people doing extraordinary things. It was teens, it was adolescents who were boarding buses, going down south, being hosed down in the streets, who made this social movement successful. Anyone ever hear about apartheid? right? It was young people in partnership with adults who helped to challenge apartheid by taking out the Bantu system of education. And they taught the whole world that if you want to redirect a nation, you have to aim your sights at education. Let's repeat that real quick. If you want to change a nation, like you mean it. If you want to change a nation, aim your sights on education. And then in Brazil, they had budget cuts. Anyone ever had budget cuts before? Maybe your sector or field? Probably not. This never happened. Ever. Especially with the former governor, it never happened. So in Brazil, they had budget cuts from education and youth services. And youth, in partnership with adults, got the Brazilian government to adopt the UN's rights of a child. Once they adopted that, it was a violation to that to have all these budget cuts. The UN's rights of a child protects young people to getting the support they need to succeed educationally, to make sure they're not exploited in employment. The UN's rights of a child has been adopted by every major nation in the Western world except for 2, and Somalia is one of them, and they don't have a functioning government. Anyone want to guess what the other government is that has not adopted the UN's rights of a child? Help me out, Jocelyn. The U.S. Turn to your other neighbor, say, neighbor, we have work to do. And I say this because we are living in a historic moment, but I believe there is ample evidence to prove this, that we are on the verge of a great youth awakening. And we see evidence of this with young people using social media to overthrow the dictatorship of Mubarak in Egypt. We see evidence of this, and young people speaking out at Parkland, Florida, making sure that their voices are heard. Evidence of this, of young people and communities speaking out about police brutality with the Black Lives Matter movement. Evidence with young people like Miss Malala, who won a little award. I can't remember exactly. It's a little thing. Put on the resume. She won a Nobel Peace Prize when she was 17 years old. How many more Nobel Peace Prize laureates are in our midst? But I can guarantee you one thing, this will never happen, ever, if these young folks don't have elders in their lives. Every time you walk in the room, every time you're in proximity to a young person, they're asking the question, is this someone I can trust? Is this someone I could partner with? Is this someone who really sees the real me? Doing this work with young people required us to do some work on ourselves. And something happens when you even look at a young person. When you believe in your mind and in your heart that they are agents of change, the energy changes in the space when you come in and you see them as being the sculptures. Not just talking about it, but walking about it as well. So, critical question here as we start to wrap this up. How well are we doing in working through our own implicit biases towards youth? What support would be helpful for you? How can we ensure that every student in our care has at least one elder who has done this work? I love hearing how the folks at River Falls are embedding this into the way that they are doing life, part of the culture of their school, right? How can we even crank that up a little bit more in our classrooms and in our schools and district? Let's take it just a couple minutes and we'll be wrapping this up soon. All right, I'm really enjoying this conversation. And I want to encourage you to continue the conversation within the LACCS community, with us on Twitter. I think I missed something. But raise your hand if you know there's some more work that needs to be done in this area. Raise your other hand if you know that there's some folks in this community who are maybe a little further along in doing this work. And if you think you could use a little additional support, put both hands in the air if you think there's some additional support. Okay. All right. And there's a lot of folks that are here to help you. We're going to share some resources at the end. So we talked a little bit about sparks. I'm not going to cover that in depth. I think you guys have a good handle on it. Seeing those sparks embedded in cultures and traditions different than our own. We want young people to become, and staff to become, multiculturally competent. Feeling celebrated in their culture, but fluent in the traditions of another culture. Right? So I want to talk about the institutional goal of SEL. Right? Bridging this power gap through the 100% accountable and live to give mindset. Supporting youth healing and activating youth voice. How many of us have heard of this term, post-traumatic stress disorder? PTSD, right? How many of us have ever heard of this term, post-traumatic growth? Anyone ever heard of this before? I didn't hear about it until recently as well. Have you heard of resilience? Similar. So, right? Grit, right? So this notion of resilience is someone has a traumatic event, some experience that sets them back. Resilience is bouncing back to baseline. Post-traumatic growth is the phenomenon where people turn the pain into propane. They experience empowerment, clarity of purpose, and enhance interpersonal relationships. So, some research, Calhoun and Tedeschi talk about this. Changing the way an event is perceived can actually give someone insight, clarity, and a greater sense of purpose because of that incident. Now, when we look at post-traumatic growth globally, there's some different common grounds, different mindsets that create a context for this to occur. There's a notion that we are connected. It happens in communities where there's a culture of storytelling. Get this. When young people are exposed to the stories of elders who've been through traumatic experiences and who learned or grew or experienced some redemption as a result. When folks are hearing this story as they grow up, they know that post-traumatic growth, they may call it something else, is possible in their lives. It happens in a context where young people are able to share their stories in culturally relevant ways, exercising this passion-first mindset. This may be visual art, it may be dance, it may be theater, right? And it happens in collectivist cultures. How many of us know there's a difference between an individualistic culture and a collectivist culture? It can be triggered in a collectivist culture when folks start to take social action to transform their realities. Now, using this as a lens, some of this is going on in the case study. We're getting young people to comb through the records of history, getting them to interview folks in the community, to interview parents, to hear about their stories. And this is exposing them to this possibility. Getting them to share their own stories through poetry, art, raps, and music. Embedding that social emotional competence in their own creative faculties. And then doing these critical service learning projects where they identify these core issues, are in partnership with adults to enact social change. Now, youth voice is a term that we hear a lot. Raise your hand if you've heard this term before. The research has a very textbook definition, having leadership in the last year, comfort expressing yourself, community problem solving, civic involvement. This is something that they have a scale for. We can actually quantify your agency and voice, right? There's indexes for this. What the research tells us is less than 15% of youth feel like they have a voice. And how many of us know if young people don't have a voice, they will find some other way to be heard? Or they will suffer silently, right? Which I think gets to the heart of the opioid epidemic. But I love this definition of youth voice coming from youth. This is out of a youth program out of Los Angeles, California. I'll just read it. An expression of the human spirit that is shown in different forms such as art, words, poetry, and music. Engaging in the creation of your own opportunities to speak out to authority. Believing and putting our voices into practice so youth can be taken seriously. Raise your hand if you know this is a multi-dimensional definition. Raise your hand if you know student council doesn't capture all the fullness of this brilliance. Raise your hand if you feel some power even just hearing these words. So I know this is a lot, and we're going to share these slides with you. Mary's going to make sure of that. She's my elder holding me accountable. But I want to share with you a spectrum of youth voice empowerment, all right? So the bottom end of the spectrum is a youth services approach. We're going to come, and you're going to be a part of our intervention. You're our patient, our client in this program. We're going to fix you, right? A step up from that is youth development, taking a strength-based approach, engaging young people in a developmentally appropriate way. Building off of youth development is youth leadership. Young people meeting their needs, learning how to meet the needs of others. The best of this gets rolled into civic engagement. Young people being involved in the democratic processes in an organization and in their community. And the best of all this rolls into youth organizing, or another term that gets used for this is something that is youth-led, where young people are the co-creators of policies, plans of action, even have decision-making power in what programs get adopted. This is where we start to have systemic change, right? Young people and adults in partnership. The Annenberg Institute found that youth-led engagement led to increased student attendance, improved test scores, higher graduation rates, and increased college-going aspirations for high school-age youth. Raise your hand if you like these outcomes. With our youth, I think this whole thing wouldn't have been crystallized without this project. They needed an experience to feel themselves as being agents of change. The community needed an experience to see them in this light. And what happens, I believe every young person has a switch. And the switch is when they realize that reality is something that is not fixed or static. Reality is something that is moldable like clay. And that they can mold reality. They don't need to escape reality when they realize they have the power to change reality. One of my favorite quotes, Buckminster Fuller says, "You don't change reality by fighting it head on. You change reality by creating a new model that makes the current model obsolete." When the young people demonstrated what happens when they're turned up and leaders and agents of change, the old model had to shift and fade away. The teachers are like, "Oh, this is what we want." And the teachers who were the non-believers had to either get on board or they had to leave, because a new model had come to be that required an update and an upgrade in the pedagogy and the way that youth were being engaged, right? And so that piece of youth voice and service learning, I think, is so critical. So my last question for you all for tonight is this: how are we currently doing in being trauma-informed and creating environments for trauma to be transformed into healing and growth? How are we currently doing in nurturing authentic youth voice and engagement? How many of us know there's a difference between symbolic and authentic youth voice? Where do you need support? We're just going to take a couple minutes with this, and then we're going to land the plane. All right? That's what my wife will say. Let's land the plane. All right, 2 minutes. Let's go. Okay, family. I don't want to keep you too long. I know many of you have been working all day. You got families that are excited to see you. But let's continue the conversation, both online and offline here today. Feel free to share your insights, questions with us on Twitter. We're going to be around for a little while afterwards. Feel free to share some insights, questions that way. So we started this journey looking at going from surviving to thriving, right? Activating SEL and equity to promote youth voice. And I want to summarize this whole talk using a metaphor that one of my elders shared with me, Dr. Sean Ginwright. And Sean Ginwright has a good friend of his who's a botanist. And evidently they do research on plants, right? And so I just, botanists, I didn't realize, okay, what kind of research? Plants. Oh, interesting. So botanists have these ideas of doing different experiments, and this particular experiment that his friend conducts is that they take this plant and they put it in a clear, airtight container, and they disperse all these poisonous toxins in the air. And what do you think happens to the plant? The plant dies. So I don't know what these guys are smoking. They have another idea. They're going to get a bigger container with more plants, and they're going to disperse more toxins. And what do you think happens to all the plants? They all die. How do they get money for research? I'm still trying to figure this out. I think they are smoking something sometimes. So then one of the guys is like, dude, I got an idea, man. Let's arrange all the plants so they're touching. And they do it. And they disperse the toxins. And something strange happens. They detoxify the environment and created a thriving community. So what does this have to do with what we discussed today?
Well, everything.
For example, relationship. We got to work together. River Falls. Any thumbs up on that at least? Yeah. Say it again. Other insights? Building bridges? Less walls, more bridges maybe?
Get in sync with the universe.
Get in sync with the universe. You can't do it alone. We're in it together. Got to keep growing. Say it again. Relationships are key. And what if we can collectively embark on a journey where we commit to bridging these generational gaps, these gaps of culture, these gaps of power? What if we actually touch leaves? Take a look around this room. Look at all these amazing folks on this journey. Folks who have experience, who have insight. We have colleges who have experience and insight doing PDs. There's different national experts here to support you in bridging these gaps. 7 Mindsets, Castle. I know I promised Mary I'd share this. If you want to get a free copy of the PowerPoint, you can go to this link, 7mindsets.com/Roberto, and get the full PowerPoint. I had to skip over some slides. You can get the references to the research. And if you want access to our published articles, we just published a chapter in an academic book talking about culturally relevant thriving. I just finished last night, bless you, a white paper talking about systemic implementation of equity and SEL. If If you want access to that, reach out. My colleague Barb will be happy to send that to you. So, I'll leave you with this quote as we conclude our time. Cesar Chavez once said, "Once social change begins, it cannot be reversed. You cannot uneducate the person who has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride. You cannot oppress the people who are not afraid anymore." And my remix extension is, you cannot desensitize people who have learned how to feel the world. And in feeling the world, we learn how to heal the world. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you, Roberto. And thank you for all your energy you brought tonight. I know it can be a long day for all of us, so it was great to have your energy and enthusiasm. I'd also like to say thank you to Tammy for her activities that she did with us. So how about a clap whoosh for Tammy? And then I'd like to thank Cheryl for her note-taking here, and I hope you have a chance in the end to come over and really take a look at the beautiful work she did and the visual graphic representation of that presentation tonight. So Tammy, or Cheryl, thank you.
Feel free to take pictures and share it on social media. Just tag me, that'd be great. But yeah, more people that know about it, the more people can see the value of doing this in schools as a literacy tool.
So, thank you. Then I have just a couple quick announcements for us tonight. So the next session for LACCS will be on April 11th. That's an all-day session, 8:30 to 3:30, and we'll be looking at trauma-informed practices. Sarah Daniel from St. A will be presenting with us. So school visits. For those few schools who still have not had a visit from our directors, if you haven't signed up, just go to the Sign Up Genius and pick a date and time. Those slots are still open for, I think there's more in March. And if we have to go to April, we can go to April. But please do sign up so we can come see your schools. So also at our next session in April, we're going to be talking about your posters. We're going to be giving some instructions. We'll be sending that out relatively soon. And I want you to think about your plan and where you are right now, because by the time you get to the April session, you'll really only have about 3 weeks to get your poster done. And your poster is the highlights of your plan. So at this point, you should really be trying to finalize your plan, or have your things formatted, and then when you come to the next session in April, we can take questions on the plan as well as the poster. Summer conference, you've got some flyers in your packet. Remember, for all the LACE and LACES alums who are here tonight, that you get a $50 discount when you come to the summer conference. And all of this present cohort, you are free for this summer conference. So, and then handouts from last month, if anyone missed that, see me afterwards. I have those. You're going to be getting a book, if you haven't already, on Better Than Carrots or Sticks, which is a book Drew recommended when he was here last month. So 1 per school. We're going to be passing those out right now. And then the last thing is evaluations. Please complete your green sheets tonight. River Falls, please do the online registration. And if you are a guest, if you could just write guest on your registration so we know that you're not part of the regular cohort, that helps us. Thank you. Have a great night.